right, so quick introduction. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the pronunciation has really regained momentum in second language teaching. That was not always the case in the heydays of communicative language teaching. Pronunciation or form as a whole, including grammar and vocabulary, were neglected and not taught at the expense of fluency, I suppose, and oral communication as a general. But this has changed. Pronunciation is riding an enormous wave at the moment. But that connection between neuroscientific principles, I'm calling them neuroscientific principles because we don't have the time to look at neuroscience as a whole. And I think we need, as practitioners, we need to, less is more, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. We hone in on a few things and do them and see what happens. But I'm trying to bridge that, or make that connection between neuroscientific principles and pronunciation instruction, and also pronunciation learning, of course. Why is this important? Well, there's a number of factors that we can discuss. For one, prosody or suprasegmentals, that includes intonation, rhythm, stress. So these suprasegmental features are really important for our brain to process new information in English. And that's because English is, we use stress, prominence or sentence stress to communicate meaning in English in conjunction with intonation. And so for our brain to process, prosody is absolutely important, meaning pronunciation is critical. Now I love this quote here by Judy Gilbert, that our sense of self and community are bound up in the speech rhythms of our first language. These rhythms were learned in the first year of life and are deeply rooted in the minds of our students. So you can see the mind here is starting to pop up here already. I'll come back to that in a moment. And also, if you look at the third point here, the separation of the mind and body is really not useful when it comes to teaching, and it's not a useful view of us human beings, because the body is part of teaching, right? The body is part of learning, and that's the bottom bullet here, embodied teaching. Go to Holmes' paper in TESOL Quarterly in 2012 if you're interested here. The mind, brain, and body are inseparable. It doesn't make sense to separate them. Meaning is created and derived from movement, touch, and gestures. And those are the three components I'm going to look at in the next couple of minutes. Why is movement important? That's not just pronunciation instruction, but in general, again, that's a neuroscientific principle. Moving, when we move, our muscles signal to the brain to pay attention. So when you sit all day, much what I'm doing at the moment, at work marking essays, when I sit all day, my brain shuts down, right? When we move, the brain gets activated and the muscles tell us to pay attention. Exercise and movement in general facilitate, therefore, plasticity, brain growth, learning, teaching. And the connection to pronunciation here is relatively straightforward. What Adrian Underhill too suggests that pronunciation is a physical activity, right? So you want to have your students move when you teach pronunciation. You want them to feel and experience these articulatory features, the rhythm of the English language. You want them to get involved. You can't think yourself to better pronunciation. The second one is gestures. Gestures in applied linguistics and ELT, English language teaching, that's a really large body of research now. People like McCafferty do exceptional work here. And what we know is that hand gestures in general mediate or facilitate second language teaching and second language learning. And when gestures are combined with speech, memory is enhanced, and recall of things like vocabulary is tremendously improved. So in terms of bridging that over to pronunciation, or there's another bullet here, the use of gestures facilitates comprehension. So basically, the interlocutor listens with his or her eyes, right? So why is, when we teach language, you know that speaking on the phone is a very daunting task for many language learners, because you don't have the visual cues, that the gestures are absent, right? And so listening with your eyes is a critical component, and the research has very clearly shown that teaching gestures need to be done. And so when we teach pronunciation, gestures need to be included. When you teach intonation, for example, that's just a given. It's a good article there by Smitrova in 2017, I believe, is also TESOL quarterly. Next one, touch. I think touch is in applied linguistics that has not been discussed in great detail, which is interesting because the skin is the largest organ that we have, right? It's an average human. The skin weighs about 4 kilograms, and that receptor system in the skin sends information to the brain through touch. So every time you touch something, the brain gets a signal, information, and it is the most common and the most frequently used sense. And then when people interact with the environment, but we need to be careful. Cognitive overload here is critical, right? That's a thing we need to keep in mind. What we know from research is that touch improves learning, and it enhances memory. So if students can touch things, that kinesthetic tactile aspect in their memory is enhanced. And very interesting, a study here, bridging over to pronunciation, is that if there's an ambiguous situation, like you look at the diphthongs E versus AE, that's for many learners an ambiguous difference there. If you add touch, that becomes much more clearly for the students, as opposed to just relying on vision. So you could draw these, on the board, the IPA symbols, and that visual cue there is not really doing much. But when we add touch to that, then that ambiguity is often removed, and things become more clear to the learner. So in terms of pronunciation teaching, hands-on activities need to be taught or included. A lot of teachers clap, and there seems to be some research, or there seems to be evidence out there now that clapping may improve pronunciation, but that's still a bit of a contested notion. To what extent actually that is the case, we don't, there's a lot to explore in this area. So what is a potential solution to this? How can we bring those three, movement, gesture, and touch, together? Well, I think one effective way is haptic pronunciation instruction. And some of you might be familiar with the term haptic. That's a systematic use of movement and gesture. And I've been very fortunate to have been working with a great team with about half a dozen scholars on the design of this haptic framework for the last almost 15 years now. Why is haptic instruction a potential solution? Well, it integrates gestures, movement, and touch, but it also uses sight and sound. Smell, we haven't figured out yet. It captures the speaker's attention for about 3 seconds. So that window there, very short window, you got the learners, if you missed that, teachable moments lost. It improves production and reception. Speaker confidence is enhanced, so teaching movements and touch, it translates not only in improved intelligibility, but speaker confidence. And there is evidence that it may enhance memory and vocabulary recall. Bianca, we have a PhD student we have is a very promising study here. That's actually published in the think tank issue, November, I think, 2019. And as Cosolino says, the brain reacts to novelty, so students are keen on learning new things. If you want to know more about this, have a look at Bill Acton's blog, or my website has a lot of these articles. There's links that you can access that we made available. So there's a bit of reading for you there. Or you might as well just join us next June in Kyoto. How about that? That'd be exciting too, because I'll be there. I'll be doing a workshop, so there's more time for learning.